Something kind of unexpected happened in Star Citizen over the last couple of weeks, and it didn't come from a big announcement or a polished reveal. There was no trailer, no CitizenCon moment, no marketing push behind it at all. VR just kind of showed up. It all started when a developer post on Spectrum heralded the announcement, and immediately people started talking. Like, a lot. Way more than I think anyone expected. Players who hadn't logged in for years were asking how to try it. VR folks who normally don't care about Star Citizen were suddenly paying attention. Even non-Star Citizen VR creators were covering it, and longtime backers were seeing the game in a completely different way for the first time. What makes this interesting is how unofficial all of it is. CIG doesn't have a dedicated VR team. Sean Tracy confirmed they still don't have a team for this internally, and straight up said on Spectrum the implementation is experimental and risky. This is happening because a small group of developers cared enough to try it, not because it's some approved pillar of development, and despite that, the reaction has been massive. That puts leadership at CIG in a weird spot, because VR is clearly resonating, but it's also happening off to the side. There's no long-term support structure around it. There's absolutely zero roadmap commitment. If it didn't work at all, they'd abandon it and say, maybe someday. And as players, we have no guarantee it keeps moving forward at the pace people want, because right now this lives and dies with one amazing developer's free time. And that raises a bigger question than just, is VR cool in Star Citizen? Which of course the answer is, fuck yes. The real question is whether Star Citizen should keep treating VR like a side project, or whether this is one of those moments where the community response is loud enough that it deserves real investment. That's what I want to talk about. Because right now, VR feels like something that accidentally worked. Historically, those are the things that either get abandoned quietly when the realization is that it's unsustainable, or become something much bigger. But what really caught my attention beyond the fact that VR worked, and worked better than anyone ever imagined it could, was how fast people reacted once they realized it was here, and playable. This wasn't one of those situations where a handful of VR diehards were cheering it on, while everyone else rolled their eyes. We've been there. Anyone that's been on the VR Citizen Discord is a veteran of the long-running Hope campaign for native Star Citizen support. This was bigger. The response cut across a lot of different groups, including longtime backers and people that had previously cycled out of the game. It's got attention from people who normally only follow Star Citizen from a distance. Hell, even folks who are usually pretty critical of the project took notice. And while I don't actively seek that kind of content out, I've yet to see anyone meaningfully dismiss VR in Star Citizen. Overall, the tone was different. It wasn't hype from a feature years away like we're accustomed to. It was more like surprise. People logging in and going, oh, wow. I didn't expect that to feel like this. That kind of reaction is rare, especially in Star Citizen. We usually know about things years before we ever get our hands on a shitty Tier 0 implementation. A lot of games add VR and it feels bolted on. Neat for 5 minutes, then you go back to playing normally. Star Citizen is doing the opposite. Even in this early, unofficial state, VR immediately highlights what the game already does well. Scale, presence, physical spaces, cockpits that feel like places instead of UI skins. And that's why the reaction matters. When players respond this strongly to something that wasn't marketed, isn't polished at all, and really wasn't even supposed to be a headline feature, that's incredibly meaningful. It means they accidentally captured lightning in a bottle. The problem is that Star Citizen doesn't really have a framework for responding to that kind of success. It's not something CIG can comfortably talk up without committing to expectations they might not be ready to meet, and you can feel that hesitation in how cautiously they are discussing it. There are tons of developer Spectrum posts which live in CIG's walled garden, but no major Inside Star Citizen episodes on VR, no scheduled Star Citizen live segments discussing it, just silence on the outward-facing official channels. Looks like Star Citizen just stumbled into one of the most compelling ways to experience its universe, and then immediately put its hands in its pockets and said, yeah, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. For a game that prides itself on selling everything, selling this short is a really interesting pivot. And that's where things start to get complicated. Going all in on VR isn't just a, yeah, let's do it moment from a movie or TV show where a decision is made and a montage kicks off. It means committing people, time, and money to something that right now is still officially labeled experimental. A real VR effort would require a dedicated team. You need engineers, but also dedicated UI designers, user experience specialists, and probably more roles than most of us ever think about. Once you do that, it stops being a passion project and starts becoming a responsibility and a budgetary line item. A dedicated VR team could unlock some massive advantages. Eye tracking alone would be a game changer for performance. Dynamic foveated rendering could significantly reduce the GPU load in a game that's already pushing hardware harder than almost anything else on the market. Dare I say that with that technology, Star Citizen might run better in VR than on a standard monitor, at least if you don't also need a streamable output. Star Citizen is also uniquely positioned to benefit from VR in ways other games aren't. Its ships are already physical spaces, its cockpits are built with real depth and scale in mind, and its gameplay already slows you down and asks you to live in your character at all times. There are no shortcuts in the verse. VR doesn't fight the design here. In a lot of ways, the design already feels meant for VR. But building a team to support that means those people aren't working on something else. And right now, the elephant in the room is Squadron 42. CIG has been very clear that Squadron 42 is the priority for any team that can still push it toward release, and if they're serious about a 2026 window, that focus makes sense. Pulling engineers or designers away from that effort to stand up a VR team could introduce risk at exactly the wrong time. Even if VR feels like the future, missing another Squadron 42 window would be catastrophic from a perception standpoint. I mean, while I'm writing this script, I literally just got an email from CIG with an official Squadron 42 launches in 2026 banner at the bottom of it. I don't know if that's been on their other emails for a while, but when it's top of mind like this, you definitely notice it. Time will ultimately tell if that turns into another Answer the Call 2016 boondoggle or not. That's part of why I've personally cooled a bit on the idea of Squadron 42 launching with VR support. I want it. I want it fucking badly. But I'm no longer convinced it's realistic without an official team supporting it internally. If CIG's goal is to get that game out the door as soon as possible, at some point focus has to win. Of course, it's also possible this is all deliberate. CIG's approach to communication has changed a lot this year. They've clearly shifted toward under-promising and over-delivering, and we've seen how dramatic that swing can be. We didn't know Nyx was coming until about a month before it arrived. Every patch has been a surprise this year because there's no meaningful public roadmap. Jared Huckabee told us back in July that the new inventory system might be 2 years away. Just yesterday, CIG was hinting at early 2026 as a delivery window instead. Those communication changes aren't accidental. This feels like a company moving from a dreamy startup mindset into a live service development studio. So it wouldn't shock me if VR is being treated the same way. Try to keep expectations low, let the tech mature quietly, then talk about it when it's ready to stand on its own with even more features. But there's also a more human angle to all of this that I don't think gets talked about enough. Some of the best work happens when people are experimenting on something rather than performing an assigned task. When something is a passion project, there's energy there, curiosity, pride. Once it becomes a job, that can change. At least for me. Some of my best scripts come together when I'm supposed to be doing something else. Hopefully my boss isn't watching this video. Sorry, Phil. Right now, Star Citizen is sitting on something genuinely special. VR doesn't make it a different game, but it reveals the real potential of what the game has already been building toward for years. The question isn't whether VR support belongs in Star Citizen. I think that answer feels pretty obvious at this point. The real question is CIG prepared to commit to VR with the structure it needs to thrive? That decision is going to say a lot about where Star Citizen goes from here, and you can be sure I'll be watching intently.